Our next speaker today, whom I would like to present, is Svitlana Chunikhina, who came here in spite of the fact that it was her vacation. Pani Svitlana is a political psychologist, a candidate or PhD in psychological sciences, a vice president of Political Psychologists of Ukraine, of the Organization of Political Psychologists of Ukraine. She consults numerous publications and media. Svitlana is also deputy director for the Institute of Social and Therapeutic Psychology of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. And I would like to now give the floor to Pani Svitlana. She will talk about. We formulated her presentation in the following way. Just a second. Belief in conspiracy theories and superstitions as social bubbles. Please, the floor is yours. First of all, I'm very grateful to Bożena and Bogdan for inviting me. It's very interesting for me to be here, primarily because I think that theater is a powerful way of studying reality, and it's a great. I feel very fortunate to be part of this project that unites scholarly study and creative search to help us better understand where we are, the moment in which we live. Bożena has already told you the topic of my presentation today, but in working on this subject, I went a bit further, unfortunately. Now, more is not always better, but it is what it is. So here are some of my thoughts about conspiracy theories in 4 questions and answers. We will also touch upon superstition and social bubbles. So, first slide, please. So, a small question for you. What do you think? What images are hidden in this image? What do you see here? Faces, okay. What else? Blood. Great. The blue and yellow, right? As a hint to Independence Day. Yes. Protest. Okay. Ketchup. Creation. Process of creation. Aggression. These abstract images. Okay. Well, I suggest we stop here. And this is a painting by Jackson Pollock. It's abstract painting. It doesn't depict anything, but there are at least several people among us who are more or less inclined to treating the conspiracy theory with more attention than others, because the ability to see patterns in abstract painting, it correlates to the ability to see patterns in events, whether or not they're they're truly are. Now, this is not to insult anyone. So let's switch to the first question then. I don't know who's translating. I won't voice the question. It says why people continue to believe in conspiracy theories. I hope the translator finds a pause to translate this for English-speaking listeners. So why do, in the 21st century, with all the technological advantages, achievements, and seeing yourself as modern people, although of course people always think they're modern people at any age, but why do we persist in believing in conspiracy theories? Well, there are 3 possible answers. One of them is that conspiracy theories are a solution to crises or problems, emotional, cognitive, or even existential ones. The fact that science and psychology, including psychology, knows about what our epistemic apparatus, how our epistemic apparatus works, lets us conclude that our epistemic apparatus is essentially well adapted to perceive faith and conspiracy, belief in conspiracy. Cognitive biases are, of course, we all know about cognitive biases, and one is the ability to infer causation in events that where causation is not present. Second one is the bias of when we see the brighter events or more flashy events as more believable, and then until recently we also believed that the conspirological beliefs are present in people who have worse analytical ability. We used to believe this, or who are less intellectual, which is not true. And it turns out that it's the opposite. It's people who possess greater analytical ability are more inclined to believe in conspiracy theory. And the same people who believe in conspiracy theory are sometimes more sensitive to their own cognitive biases. That's the paradox. So another problem that conspiracy theory solves are emotional problems. Panirana has already mentioned this in her brilliant presentations. The world truly is unpredictable and difficult. It doesn't seem to possess a lot of sense, and this sense of unpredictability, it creates a powerful emotional pressures. People have to be sure in the fact that events are predictable, and if they're predictable, they're controllable. And basically, conspiracy theories is a way to deal with this collective unease that arises from unpredictability and chaos. And so they're attractive for any people, including highly educated, highly intelligent people, etc., etc. The third problem that conspiracy theories might solve are an existential problem. And this is where we reach the topic of our presentation of our meeting today. How is belief in conspiracy theories, conspirological thinking, and religion and faith, how are they connected? Well, Karl Popper have the thesis that the belief in gods and the belief in conspiracy theory emerged from the same roots. Many people have debated with this idea. I would like to argue against it as well. Yes, it's true that they might come from the same root, but they grow in opposite directions. To a believer, in my opinion, the world in which you feel the presence of God is filled with meaning, and it's the presence of God that gives trust to him that things are happening as they must happen because it's God's will, isn't it? Conspirological thinking is the faith of those who cannot trust anyone. And so these are opposite stances. Only order gives people the illusion of predictability. Moreover, things can not only be predicted, they can be prevented. And if they cannot be prevented, then there's the consolation prize of the ability to logically explain failure. So that is the idea there. But I would like to say that conspirological theories are kind of an intellectual trap, intellectual pitfall that soothes people in thinking that the real order is not what they're showing us, but what they're trying to hide from us. Conspirological thinking doesn't want to actually finally find the truth. It only wants to expose lies. That is, in my thinking, that is how I believe the conspirological theories might resolve existential problems for the modern person. The second question is why we still to the question of why we still believe these theories is because conspirological thinking offers evolutionary advantages. This is the anthropological approach. Scholars look at conspirological thinking as a side effect of certain evolutional ability, of pattern detections, pattern recognition, so to speak, the ability to see and recognize meaningful images in the white noise of the world, or the ability to recognize uh, coalitions and their modalities, sometimes accepting, so sometimes it's better to mistake a belt for a snake than the other way, to mistake a snake for a belt. But other people think that belief in conspiracy thinking is even they go even further, that they think it's one of the it's its own evolutionary ability, sui generis. It's something that we've learned to we've learned to discover, to find coalitions that form in our social bubbles and so our social, to see whether they're friendly or not. And we can change the slide here. So there's this great table, and that's what, and this is continuing the belt and the snake analogy. So yes, you can see that, yes, the conspiracy theory, there's more advantage to perceiving to falsely believe in conspiracy theories, and this has to do with it. So the third reason why we continue to believe in conspiracies is that conspiracies exist. The work politics among chimpanzees, there's a very dramatic and very touching description of how conspiracies of two young chimps against an older leader, and it was very similar to a human mutiny, with coalition, with seeking adherence. So the entire human history, not just human history, but also animal history of our evolutionary ancestors, tells us that conspiracy accompany the history of humanity for as long as humanity exists. And we can think of many conspiracies that have worked, that became well known, and we can probably suppose that many conspiracies also succeeded without becoming known. So yes, conspiracies exist. So why might we not want to expose another conspiracy in this sensory chaos that surrounds us today, including informational chaos? So that's the first question. So to sum up, why we believe in conspiracy theories: because they solve our life problems, because they are an evolutionary advantage, because they confer an evolutionary advantage, and also because actual conspiracies exist. The second question is a frequent question that journalists ask me when they ask about various conspirological thinking. Are conspiracy theories the reason for social crisis, for extremist behavior, or for can beliefs in conspiracy theories push people into sects? I believe that they do not, that they cannot. It's rather that people end up in various sects. Yes, they do have conspirological thinking, but this is usually due to their emotional involvement with the leader, emotional entanglement with the leader, who's usually a premium personality who then cultivates conspirological worldview. There are other studies that show that belief in conspirological theories correlates with belief in mystical and paranormal phenomena. But whether that connection, whether there's causation there, we doubt it. I doubt it. I think it's more correlation than causation. There's a third change, which is a reason. the so-called, which is causal, the so-called unstable attachment style that is formed in early socialization, as such, can be the reason both for conspirological thinking in future and mystical thinking and extremist behavior and other socially undesirable behaviors. Maybe so, maybe not. So can we switch to the next question? Third question. Yes, conspirological thinking is not innocent. It does bring concerning consequences and effects. For instance, there are studies that show that people who, this is a fresh example, the anti-vaxxers, right? The so-called anti-vaxxers, people who deny, downplay or deny the danger of coronavirus, or they talk about the danger of vaccines and they see intentions, nasty intentions by some kind of world government to install and to surveil people. They usually don't vaccinate. You know, they get sick, they die, they infect others. And it's also known that there's studies that people who tend to conspirological explanations or interpretations, they either refuse to participate in politics at all, or they do participate, they do vote, but they vote for populists, which is also not great for society. But there are more dangerous consequences. As we know, the protocol of the elders of Zion, led to very conspirologists like to find scapegoats who can then be faced with all the negative, and then they often legitimize violence, and that's true, and it's pretty bad. Another aspect is that there's a story. As we know, for instance, for the Protestants, it wasn't just people of color who were their enemies, but also the Catholics of the world, right? They were very afraid of the Catholics to such an extent that sooner or later they started imitating them on the level of rituals. The Ku Klux Klan started to imitate them on the level of rituals and the level of behavior. So this white hood of the Ku Klux Klan is a kind of an imitation of Catholic priests, and it's very interesting that the fighters against imaginary conspiracies often become bearers of real conspiracies, as we see this in the attack on the Capitol in the winter. Most of those who attacked the Capitol on January 6th were believers in the QAnon. So these are very exotic interpretations, but people have suffered, and so there was a real threat there. There's a real threat to human life, and most importantly, what are the another negative effects of conspirological thinking? Well, the belief in conspiracy theories turn people away from fighting real problems. The problem is that the government really is power really is asymmetrical. There are people who suffer from a sense of helplessness. They feel like they're marionettes of other people's will. Different corporations and governments really do abuse their power to continue this asymmetrical division. And really, every discovery of such a conspiracy really is better for humanity in terms of moving towards a fairer and more humane order, including social order. But the problem is that conspiracy theories are not aimed at social advancement, at bettering society. Conspiracy theories provide other bonuses. They the advantage of conspiracy theory is the belief, the true end, the true point of conspiracy theory is this sense of emotional it's this sense of revenge, of is this, you show me this but I know it's different, and you want to fool me but I'm fooling you. So it provides kind of emotional release, but it doesn't solve the problem. And so uh, as a scholar said, which I will give all the citations later, conspirologists ask questions but they rarely find good answers. So to switch to my favorite question, if the discovery of real conspiracies is leads society to progress, but belief in false conspiracy theories really is actually antisocial, is traps society. How do we tell the difference then? How do we tell the difference between a real conspiracy with it from conspiracy theory? Next slide. Yes. This is, I think about this a lot, and sorry, the slide says no way. There is no way to do this, and I think about this a lot, and I'll tell you a story to illustrate. In 2006 in Moscow, there was a massive scandal when there was an announcement that there was some sort of technology with spy technology that allowed the British special services to surveil something and listen in. So everyone laughed at this, but then later someone from MI6 said that yeah, this really existed in Moscow. So can this be taken at face value? Can this be taken as something that is true? Well, obviously the criterion of believability doesn't work for our task. It doesn't let us tell the difference between a real conspiracy and an imaginary conspiracy. Let's look at epistemological correspondence. Can conspirological thinking be part of a scientific worldview? Let's look at, for instance, belief in reptiloids, reptile overlords. Right, from what we know from science that we have today, we can assume that there aren't that reptiloids don't exist. However, at the moment when we think this doesn't exist, this is not possible. I remember, I always forget her last name. It's just a second. Barbara McClintock. Sorry, I keep forgetting the last name. She came up with this so-called jumping genes. She was studying. She found out that genes can transfer. She called them jumping genes, and of course this was this was at a time when we were far from a victory of feminism. I mean, we're still far from it now, but nevertheless, she was laughed at, brutally laughed at, both because she's a woman and also because her idea seemed epistemologically suspect. And I think about 20 years later, these jumping genes, it turns out that these were rediscovered, and they moved genetics forward. So it seems to me that this criterion is not really helpful to us either. There is also, theoretically, there's the evolutionary theory. This evolutionary advantage tells us that as representatives of different groups, we can recognize conspiracy or mutiny among members of other groups, us against them. And so we know that people with parietal violations often generate conspiracy theories that is aimed personally at them as someone who are so unique that they're personally attacked by forces of evil, they're personally hunted, they're personally persecuted. this can be a criterion. So if the conspiracy is us versus them, it is more likely to be telling of a true conspiracy than, if it's them against me. I was very happy when I found this criterion, but then I remembered Navalny and other politicians who suffered or were killed because of a conspiracy that was entirely, completely real, which was absolutely aimed at someone personally, although he was, of course, a psychologically healthy person. So this criterion fails as well. And so we only have this one criterion that is more or less reliable. David Grimes, the Oxford physicist, in 2016, he published a mathematical model that allows us to measure the correlation or correspondence between the secrecy of a mutiny and the number of people who can be part of the conspiracy. If we look at the moon landing, for instance, for this moon landing to be fake, then the entire thousands and thousands of employees of NASA would have had to know that there was no landing. But this fake has persisted now for what, 60 years? Right, about 60 years, yes. Around 6 decades. So, and no one has told, no one has spoken, right? We can think about this camera, right? In about six years passed, and one person showed up who exposed the theory. So I think that this criterion of time is the only reliable criterion that lets us differentiate whether or not we're talking about a true conspiracy, or whether it's something that is a false flag, that is that offers us a false sense of gratification, that is not productive, that is just tilting at windmills. So we only have an answer to which we don't have a serious question. So I'll just simply give you the answer I have, this answer without a question. We might note that often the actors in conspiracy theories are often either not human people, such as persons such as reptiloids, or people with such monstrous intentions that they are hard to be called humane. That is hard to call them humane. So conspirological thinking, conspiracy theory, is a way to stress one's own humanity against this inhumane attack that is coming on. And so, I mean, people often feel that there's something wrong with the world. They just can't find an explanation of what exactly is wrong, and they come up with hypotheses, and some of these hypotheses then statistically are extravagant. And so conspiracy thinking is part of it is this: we humans, we people are against, we're the last bastion of fighting for our humanity, for preserving our humanity against inhumane people. There's a wonderful series, I don't think it's very well known. It's called Brain Dead. If you haven't seen it, no one's seen it. Okay, I'm a pioneer here. Check it out if you can. It's an absolutely wonderful series, and it's about a conspiracy of a civilization of insects, and they wanted to conquer the earth, for which they needed to build a large number of special hothouses to ensure this. They affected the politicians in the following way. They would find a politician who led a particular party. They would get into that politician's ears and then into their brain, and then they would eat part of the brain, and by morning the person would wake up as a completely different personality. They would affect both Republicans and Democrats, who still remained Republicans or Democrats, but their personalities in terms of their personalities, they were like twins. They became vegan, they stopped drinking alcohol, became believers in a healthy lifestyle. So when I watched this show about 3 years ago, I mean, I'm a psychologist. I always think about this. Well, what part of the brain would they have had to have eaten for these effects to take place? I mean, it really is interesting. So because they probably weren't psychologists, the authors of this show, it's probably not neuropsychologically believable, but they ate part of the brain that responsible for doubt. So people started doubting as such in general. They stopped doubting anything, and so these people without doubts became part of this conspiracy. And so paradoxically, it seems to me that conspiracy thinking and doubt is what defines us as humans. It turns out that there's a French thinker, Thomas, that even before Descartes, he said, I doubt, therefore I exist. Dubito ergo sum. And then Saint Augustine said, if I mistake, I err, therefore I exist. So doubt and the ability to err is what makes us human. And conspiracy theory is one of the ways to remain the doubting person. That's probably another answer to the existential crisis that we are now going through. With this, I would like to end my presentation and thank you for your attention.